we are going to move to the debate now. The rules are as follows. Both candidates will receive 3-minute opening statements, 3-minute closing arguments, and have 2 minutes to answer each question. Some of the questions are directed to specific candidates. The specific candidate that the questions are directed to will be allowed to respond first, and then the other candidate will receive 2 minutes on the same topic. Our moderator for tonight is our chair of the Denver Dems, James Reyes. And in James's discretion, he can give the candidates additional rebuttal time if in those 2-minute back and forths there are issues that require further discussion. If you have additional note cards with questions, please either bring them up here, or as soon as I hand over the mic to James, I will actually come around and pick them up. And with that, I would like to welcome James Reyes, our moderator for tonight, and our 2 candidates for State House District 6, Representative Elisabeth Epps and Sean Camacho. Please give them a round of applause.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for being here. I will do my best to moderate this and be fair to both the candidates. I'm excited to see them both here. Format for tonight is we will start with a 3-minute opening statement from each candidate. Each candidate will then receive questions and will be allowed 2 minutes to answer those questions. And the opposing candidate can provide a 2-minute rebuttal if desired. And then we will end with a 3-minute closing comment from each candidate. So, are you ready? So Abe Call here, our county secretary, is going to be our timekeeper tonight. Thank you, Abe. And so you'll see he's holding up cards that kind of guide you all as to when your time is nearing end and when it's up. So let's go ahead and start with opening questions. I'd first like to start with Representative Elisabeth Epps, please. 2 minutes, 3 minutes.
Thank you. I am Representative Elisabeth Epps. I use she, hers pronouns, and it's an honor to be with us, to be here tonight. I had a medical procedure earlier today that I thought was going to prevent me from being able to be here, so I'm moving a little slower than normal, and I'm going to read more than often. When I think about, I'm going to tell you why I'm asking you to send me back to this fantastic job at the Capitol, I realized that what I'd intended to say was largely subsumed in the question by the young man who was just asking a question about why, if we passed a certain thing for a property tax, didn't we pass it for renters? Because at the heart of that question is the reflection that lands with me, which is that this race really comes down to the difference between voting for someone who's a proven advocate for the most vulnerable and for the progressive issues that we as Democrats claim to champion, and voting for someone with a D after their name. And in this case, I don't just mean this race, but the answer to why we don't have the protection for renters is because right now at the Capitol, that's not the priority of enough of our colleagues. It's the priority of many of us, but not enough. It's been an honor to be in this job, and it's been a job that's been replete with unexpected opportunities and some welcome challenges. I'm most proud of the work that we've done for those most vulnerable folks, because we know that freedom and health and wellness, it's not a zero-sum game, right? When we concentrate on those who are marginalized, we're all able to win. I'm particularly proud, since I didn't do the legislative update, I want to make sure to name one particular thing that I'm just thrilled that we finally got through this year, is finally sending to the voters the opportunity to repeal the ban on marriage that's currently in our Constitution. That's something that's different because I'm there. I'd hoped that this, my friend, you put up the same sign 2 times in a row. The same number, it doesn't matter. I'd hoped that this race would be able to be one about issues. I was skeptical that that would be what would happen, and I got a mailer today that reminded me that it's not. It's gonna be about running me or not me. And so I hope we have a chance to talk tonight about what that really boils down to. Because when it comes down to progressive values and issues, I already have the track record. I've voted for and sponsored the things that my opponent and that other conservatives running in other Democratic primaries have said they're going to do. I've already done them. It's a difference between lived experience and performative allyship. And in this moment, I'm seeing a shirt that's Sinead O'Connor, who I miss terribly and who was known for telling the truth. In this moment, we need more folks at the Capitol who tell the truth. That's who I am, that's what I've been doing, and that's what I'll continue to do if I go back. Thank you, friend.
Thank you very much, Representative. And now Sean Camacho, Representative Epps' opponent.
All right, good evening, HD6. Can everyone see me in the back? Maybe this is a little helpful. Okay, well, first off, I'd just like to say thank you to the HD6 leadership team. Being part of that team, I understand how difficult it is to put together a forum, how difficult it is to meet everyone's expectations, and I just want to say thank you for that. So again, my name is Sean Camacho, and I think most importantly for this audience is where do I stand on the issues? I am 100% pro-choice, I am pro-labor, I'm pro-gun violence prevention, I am pro-civil rights. And to me what that means is making sure we continue to fight for reproductive freedom, which is something many in this room have done for decades. We continue to protect our LGBTQ plus friends and neighbors, and we fight for equity and inclusion at every opportunity. So now that you know where I stand on the issues, I think it's important because I see a lot of friendly faces and I see a lot of new faces as well. I grew up in Colorado Springs. My mother is from Puerto Rico and my father is from Guam. And while we did not have much money growing up, what we did have is a sense of community and wanting to make a difference. And I learned those lessons and I took them to heart. And I knew very early on I wanted to live a life of service. So I attended the United States Air Force Academy. I deployed to Iraq, Afghanistan, East Africa, and Colombia. And along the way, I met one of the most important people in my life, my wife, Dr. Jessica Camacho, who I consider my most important endorsement because without my family, I simply could not do this. So we have two small boys, JJ and Eli, who attend Denver Public Schools. And I am running because I have listened to many of you in this room. You want a representative that will listen to you, that will make you feel heard, that will allow you to showcase your democratic values in a way that is respectful to the broad range of voices that we have in this community. And I intend to do just that. I am running because the most pressing issues to this district are attaining more affordable housing, lowering our cost of living, and protecting our environment. And if I am lucky enough to be the Democratic nominee, I will work with you to achieve these goals because I truly believe together, this group, activists, and everyone in this district who organizes and who really has an interest in creating lasting change, we can do some amazing things together. And I am so thankful for this opportunity to talk with you tonight. Thank you.
All right, so we have a few questions, and most of these are submitted from you all, so we will definitely get to those. But I want to start with you, Sean. When you spoke at the HD6 April monthly meeting, an audience member asked you to identify a vote that Representative Epps had taken as a legislator where you would have voted differently. You could not or did not want to identify a vote. Do you stand by that answer? And regardless, why should HD6 elect you to instead of Representative Epps when you did not seem to have a significant issue with her policy positions?
So I believe Shannon Hoffman asked that question. So Shannon, I'd come prepared if that was your card. I look at the role of a legislator, and I think the most important thing you can do is have very honest policy discussions about things that are most important and pressing to the state. And one thing that I would disagree with the way Elisabeth has voted is on the Democratic budget. The Democratic budget is our opportunity as Democrats to showcase those democratic values. We've made this budget made historic investments in K-12 education, higher ed, lowering the cost of healthcare, creating more affordable housing, and many other priorities that Democrats have fought for, again, for generations. I would never have missed an opportunity to vote for that budget. That is by far what you send legislators to do, to have those discussions and spend the public money in a way that benefits all of us. And that is something I would have done much differently.
Representative, would you like a rebuttal?
Yes. I'm going to try my best to say this calmly. I voted yes on the budget. One of the things that is really lacking, and this isn't about my opponent, But we have a real gap between what happens in the Capitol and the civics education. It is public record. Please, I think it's 1430. Somebody tell me. I think it's HB 24 1430. If you go to the page, you scroll to the bottom section on mobile, you'll see a section House and Senate, and you'll see a section that says votes, open house, and you'll see that I voted yes. That's the short answer, is that I voted yes on the budget. In alternating years, right, so this is just a matter of public record, right? Y'all, this isn't something that's subjective. I will tell you, I am not sure that I think that we should have voted yes on the budget as it is, but I did. And I did because there was more good in it than not. It's really, why I'm hesitating over my words is because there are so many legitimate differences to talk about, and it has been such a challenge in the past 2 years to face objective falsehoods, things that are publicly verifiable. You can go and look and see how I voted on the budget. You'll see that I voted yes. I'm pretty sure every Democrat did. So it's hard sometimes, just in full disclosure, to know how to respond when objectively false things are said, and that's one of them.
Thank you, Representative. This question is for Representative Epps. You made headlines during last year's special session for, amongst other things, joining a pro-Palestinian protest in the House gallery and shouting down at Representative Weinberg during his remarks. What, if anything, should voters know and consider about that incident that they have not already learned from the media or those present at the time?
Thank you for the question. I think it's a particularly fair one. The distinction I'm going to make about the factual thing is I don't see anything actually wrong with joining the protesters. That's not actually what happened in terms of we had a 40-minute recess and I went to talk to them. I mean, it wasn't joining them to protest. One of the things that I regret about how I handled that situation is how, after a year and some change of covering for my colleague, I continued to do so even after that incident. In the next day or so, I'm going to be releasing, you'll get to see what happened before what you see with me. It was on third reading. You're allowed to speak for 10 minutes. And for 7 of those 10 minutes, 2 of my colleagues, both of whom are Republicans and both of whom were carrying guns, cursed at me and yelled at me and were never gavelled. You can see later in the tape where I say to Representative Kennedy, I repeat what my colleague had said that was cursing. And Rep. Kennedy, Decree Kennedy, says, I agree that was inappropriate. So in considering it, in terms of what people should consider, you should consider that for 7 minutes, 2 men with guns yelled and cursed and were never told they were out of order. And when I responded, you're out of order, of course it's newsworthy. I'm grown enough and old enough to have I should have been able to anticipate that. But that's how that happened. My colleague and here I am I'm still gonna cover for him in that way. Yeah, so I'm much more concerned about actual civility in process than I am with sort of decorum in those moments. I don't think it's appropriate, and I think it's overtly racist, frankly, to expect me to be called out of order when men can curse at me for 7 minutes and never be interrupted. And that's actually quite what it's like to be a Black woman on the House floor.
Thank you, Representative. And by the way, if either of you would like to offer a rebuttal on any question, please let me know. Next question for yes.
Give Sean time to cut.
No, that's what I just said. Did you want to offer a rebuttal?
No.
So yeah, that's all right. So this is for you. You were quite a few years ago a registered Republican, and deserved or not, currently have a reputation as a more moderate Democrat than Representative Epps. What do you say to progressives and Democrats in general who worry that you will take moderate or even Republican policy positions if elected?
Well, I first want to say thanks for the question, because if I am here to represent you, there's a measure of transparency. And the answer is, yeah, I was a former Republican. I grew up in Colorado Springs, born to a family of Republicans, raised as a Republican. And I think, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, very early on in my life, I entered the military. And for those of you who do or do not know, that is an apolitical position. You don't talk about politics. You don't talk about your leader. You just get to do the work. So when I had the opportunity to leave the military on active duty and join the reserves, I went to law school. And for the first time in my life, I was surrounded by a group that didn't look like me, that didn't quite talk the same way that I learned from my parents. And I realized for the first time in my entire life that I was always a Democrat. Ever since I was growing up, I've always had issues with the Republican position on LGBTQ rights and reproductive choice. And when I had the opportunity to exercise those rights, it became very clear to me what I wanted to do. So I became an unaffiliated voter, because it's very jarring when you live your entire life thinking you're one thing and you do something else. And then I became active with this group. And I have had the honor and the privilege of being your captain and your co-captain and raising money and spending Saturdays a week with my kids and walking in this district and talking to Democrats and advocating for progressive policies. I don't think there's any concern about where I would be on these issues, because I've been here with you, I've stood here with you, and I intend to showcase Democratic values at the Capitol, because that is where my heart is, that is where this district is, and that's where I am. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Camacho. Representative Epps.
I sorely wish I could stand. I'm glad that our party is a relatively a big tent, and I'm glad that you are on the right side of the political party spectrum. Anyone who knows me well at the Capitol knows that by far my absolute number one favorite legislator in that building is someone who was a Republican like 10 minutes ago. So I don't hold that against a person. But I just need to name, I was born and raised in red states that fought for the Confederacy. I lived in the capital of the Confederacy. My father's family are not just Republicans, but they're Black Republicans, and I promise you that is a special breed of special Trump voting ones at that. I'm a USAA member, military family. I don't blame my place of birth or my family's military association for my political choices. And I'm glad that my opponent is in this space, but I just need to name that as a Black queer woman who had an abortion when I was a teenager in a place where that abortion is now illegal, it's really hard for me to not acknowledge that when you've spent adulthood supporting a party that would criminalize my existence, that's a very different thing. And we need candidates who have a record of, walking the walk, not just talking the talk. And we don't get to blame our party affiliation on where our parents happen to have us be born.
Thank you, Representative.
So I think it's vitally important that I'm clear. I am incredibly proud of my family, and they do not see the world the way I do, and I blame them for nothing. I am so grateful for the way they raised me, for the values that they taught me. And all due respect, Elizabeth, I respect your experience, but don't denigrate mine. This is my life, this is my political journey, and this is why I'm coming before you as your candidate for HD6. So, thank you.
Representative Epps, you're running for re-election as state representative. After your first 2-year term, what do you consider your most significant policy victories and defeats? And what, if anything, have you learned from your experience that could apply to a second term? And what would your focus of the second term be?
Thank you for that question. I think that the first term, I don't know how this would work logistically, it's not a fully fleshed out proposal, but I feel like the first term should be 3 years, where one is you get to find out which rules really count and how it works in many ways. The things that I'm most proud of are all policies, in terms of policies, are ones related to actual progressive values. And when I hear my opponent, and as I said, other moderates running in contested primaries across the state speak about what they would do, it feels really good to hear them speak about things that are policies that I've actually already supported. Specifically, I just want to name that the most important policy advances of our lifetime, of our parents' lifetime, they've never been things that pass the first time. It doesn't happen, whether it's integrating schools or whether it's, in Colorado specific, passing MLK Day as a holiday, right? It took 8 or 9 years. Ending the death penalty. It doesn't happen on the first year. So I'm most proud of being the tip of the spear to introduce legislation that's going to pass on its 3rd or 4th year is what it's going to take, specifically related to banning assault weapons, which this year passed the House because we won't let up, and with advancing drug policy that is actually led by public health experts. Passing for-cause eviction this year. That's something that was its 2nd year running. So I'm as proud of the things that haven't passed yet as I am of those that have. As important as the work we do is how we do it. We have passed in this session and others bills related to whistleblower protection, sexual harassment, workplace recovery, safe workplaces. And the Capitol is not a safe place for any of those things. And so while it doesn't show up on a bill page, I'm particularly proud of being someone who has consistently stood up for workers, stood up against sexual harassment, and stood up to have our workplace be one that is free of the abusive behavior of many of our colleagues.
Thank you. This next question is for both of you, so I'll allow you, Mr. Camacho, to go first, and then Representative Epps. Governor Polis has received criticism from Democrats for vetoing legislation that passed through the legislature and for wielding influence among legislative allies to kill legislation before it reaches his desk. If elected, will you be willing to advance legislation that the governor opposes?
I did not anticipate talking so much about my parents today, but I think there's a very important example. I mentioned I grew up in Colorado Springs, and my mother was from Puerto Rico. She did not have an education. So the way we made our money and the way I helped my mother do that was stocking grocery store shelves at the Peterson Air Force Base Commissary for 20 cents a case, 7 days a week, after school, on weekends, and that is incredibly taxing on a family. Our entire family's life changed when my mother got a job as a unionized meat cutter. For the first time in my life, we had economic security. We had a group that was looking out for us. And my mom actually used the union to make sure that her job wasn't downgraded when they decided to stop paying workers what they deserve. I am so thankful for unions. And I am so disappointed in our governor for vetoing bills that protect workers' rights. More importantly, that protect against wage theft. Because if we are Democrats, if we really care about each other and showcasing Democratic values and protecting workers, that is unacceptable. I would gladly go against the governor on those issues because that's not where this district is, that's not where I am, and that is not where my lived experience is. For me, it is very easy to do that when you come with a lifetime of experience and knowledge of how the world works and how you just feel comfortable in your own skin talking and advocating for the things that are most important to you, and I would have no problem going against the government on that issue.
Thank you. Representative Epps?
Again, the best predictor of future behaviors is past behavior. I'm proud of being endorsed by our most, I don't want to rank them, but being endorsed by the unions that you've heard of, and we'll hear more endorsements this week, where the folks who are representing workers have taken a clear side in this race, and that matters a lot. I already have gone against the governor. It's such a hollow rhetoric to say, because I've stood up that I would. You all, when our senator mentioned the House not passing the protection related to renters, well, we weren't allowed to vote on it. right? So it's true, we didn't pass it, but it didn't get to the floor. Those are the sort of machinations that happen in a way that, it's real easy to say you're going to stand up when in reality, the opportunity to stand up doesn't come up. When the governor when the governor signs one of your bills into law, you get a pen, P-E-N, right? When he vetoes one of your bills, colleague gives you a pin, P-I-N, with a V on it. So I've gotten one of those veto pins. And while I was at the rally last week with workers and standing together in objecting to the vetoes, I do want to name that the veto is actually a really, really good sign of democracy working. Because most of the bills that get killed, you never hear about getting vetoed. We do his work for him. So in a very practical way, right, getting a bill vetoed means you got it through your chamber, you got it through the other chamber, and the governor did his job. And even though we're disappointed with that, recognize that we have a 2/3 majority in the House and close to it in the Senate. Could have overridden that if we'd been allowed to vote earlier in the session. So I encourage you to consider to be critical. But yes, of course, I'll stand up. I've been doing it.
I would like to point out that organized labor is not a monolith. I am also incredibly honored to be endorsed by unions, by the Colorado Firefighters Union and the Pipefitters. These are two organizations that are out there doing the work in our community, putting lives on the line, caring about defined pension plans, caring about wage stuff, caring about worker safety, caring about workplace safety. I am so incredibly honored to be endorsed by them. And Elisabeth, you mentioned something. Past performance, I think the quote indicates future performance, or something to that effect. And I would argue that is why I'm here. I'm here to give this district a choice on different future performance. If you're interested in a representative that will work collaboratively, will respect your voice, will work to ensure that we, again, showcase democratic values with other Democrats, then I offer you a choice. Thank you.
So, I love the passion. I wish we could have something closer to a debate, and I really, really regret that I can't stand and participate in the way I'd want to, because you're right. My opponent is right when he says that unions aren't a monolith. He's now mentioned wage theft at least 3 times. In the same way that you can look up and see that, yes, I voted for the budget, look at the wage theft bill and see the 3rd name listed out of the many dozens who supported it. It's mine. This was a bill that was a priority for me, and I'm glad to know that you agree with my position on it. At some point, and I'll just make it right now, it's just important that we cut through the dog whistles when we're talking about working collaboratively. Y'all, the assault weapons ban legislation was as contentious and tense as any that we considered. And it passed the House chamber on a Sunday with a clear and convincing margin, with the support of all 7 members of our elected leadership, with relatively conservative Democrats who really would have rather not voted on the bill. That, contentious drug policy bills, bipartisan bills related to criminal legal issues, ones run with my moderate and conservative colleagues. The list of examples of collaboration are long. When you talk about collaboration and suggest that I can't do so, and my opponent does that, you have to recognize that it only becomes a problem when you're calling out the status quo about things they don't want to be called out about. Because accountability feels like an attack to people who don't want to be held accountable. That's how that lands. But you don't get to my age and my level of educational achievement, my position in life, and serving and being able to pass the bills, which are, now I finally updated my website, you can see them. You don't do that if you can't collaborate. I become conveniently not willing to collaborate when I talk about abuse, when I talk about tax money being spent on unjust wars, when I talk about issues that certain people have issues with. That's a function of policy disagreement, not the inability to collaborate.
This question will go to both, and I'll start with Representative Epps. What specific policies will you push to stabilize, protect, and lower costs for renters?
Thank you. We need more renters at the Capitol, more folks with lived experience. I sponsored 2 years in a row Protections for Just Cause, which passed this year. I sponsored last year the legislation that did not pass yet to authorize, it wouldn't enact rent control, but would authorize municipalities to consider it. While there are policies related to transit and housing that are renter specific, I consider all of our work through the lens of how it lands on folks who are living, who are renters like me. I should have named this. I am a renter. I always will be a renter. And that's just going to be my position. I am astounded that folks can say with a straight face that they are going to fight for renters when they accept money from the singular lobby that is the biggest impediment to us passing renter protections, and that is the apartment association, that is the landlord lobbies. They are influential and they get their way. They are in the way of the cascading, whether it's protection against eviction, whether it's stabilization of rent, whether it's things as little as fees related to applications, whether it's portability of credit checks. The folks who get in our way at every single juncture are these lobbies. I don't accept their money. I mean, they don't offer, but I don't accept their donations, and I'm not beholden to them. The longer answer is on my website under housing. You're not going to be able to think of a renter protection in the past 2 years that was run that I wasn't involved with to some degree.
Mr. Camacho.
I am currently not a renter. I have had the incredibly fortunate experience of being able to purchase a home. But for almost my entire adult life, since the time I left home in Colorado Springs, I was a renter. I understand the anxiety behind being able to find a place close to your work, find a place close to transportation, find a place that fits your family situation. And I was incredibly disappointed that Senator Hansen's bill that came from the Senate died in the House. I think if we are really want to get serious about helping renters, we should offer some of that Tabor surplus to them. I would love to see a bill that gives renters the first $50,000 or $60,000 of their income tax-free. And I don't try to do public math, so I did this earlier. I believe that would be about $2,000 per renter. That is a worthwhile endeavor because we need people in our community that can live in our community because rents are getting out of control. And I'd like to make a comment about the apartment association. I've taken money from the apartment association, and here's why. Colorado is 325,000 units short of attainable housing. If you are not having a conversation with the groups that control some of that ability to provide housing, you are not doing the job. This is a job about working with other people, even if you vehemently disagree with them. But at least be willing to have the conversation, because we will never get long-lasting and change without talking with people we disagree with. You cannot simply look at the Capitol and say, everybody in that corner, don't come talk to me. That is not how policy is made. You must be willing to have those tough conversations. And I've told the apartment association, I'm not going to be with you on so many different things. We have so many renters in HD6. We have so many protections we need to provide for renters, but I will have a conversation with you. And that is why they are willing to support, because they want a conversation.
Representative Epps, please.
Surely my opponent isn't suggesting, because it was right there, that in order to have a conversation with him, you have to write a check. Because not only, I mean, surely that's not what you meant. It should, I'm too grown for it to like sting me, but surely you don't think there's way too many negatives in the sentence, don't not talk to the apartment association. Of course. Of course we have. And a lot of my work is harm reduction on proposals that I don't find, ones that are appropriate for HD6 or for Denver or for Colorado. But of course I talk with those folks. Of course I talk with folks that I disagree with. That is, you don't pass the legislation I passed. The hardest bill I've had, family resiliency, which is the most deceptive vote count because it passed unanimous and it was grueling despite it being unanimous. Of course we talk with folks we disagree with. I'm going to posit that you don't need to take checks from people just to have a conversation with them.
If that is what you took from my explanation, that is not what I meant. I've talked with many of you in this room. No one gives me checks. I talk with everybody because that is what you do. And I'll make another comment. You talk a lot about being a grown woman and insinuating that I am some Pollyannish figure that doesn't understand the world. I am a grown Latino man who has lived in this world in different communities. I understand what struggle is. I understand what looks right and what is wrong. So for you to insinuate that, I reject.
Yeah, not only do I not think that you are Pollyanna-ish, but what I think is that I know that you don't understand how that place works. I sure didn't before I got there. And I have a little bit of resentment of some of the folks who could have given me a heads up about some of the elements and didn't. But it is, have you all seen the videos where a police officer is telling someone stop resisting and they're not resisting? There's no resistance happening and you hear the police officer saying stop resisting. That's what it feels like when I hear you say don't denigrate you. I'm like, I'm not denigrating you, or don't call you Pollyannish. I'm not. But it's misogynistic and it's anti-Black to frame a level to talk about this idea of not being willing to talk or collaborate because of the places where folks disagree. That's just disingenuous. I think that, you can take this from me directly. I do see you. I mean, to have to respond to the idea of someone not thinking you're grown, when I say that I'm grown, what I'm saying is that your inability, my opponent's inability to name a distinction on policy is where I find there's a troubling difference. Style, so be it. On the last day of the session, my colleagues played a greatest hits of a man who was violent, abusive, harmful. If you pay attention to the legislature, you could guess who he is, right? So the behavior that is celebrated by some folks is really alarming. I absolutely see you as an adult. I just would love to hear an actual distinction on policy.
All right, we'll start with Mr. Camacho on this question. What is your view on Tabor, and if elected, what would you do to overturn it? Assuming you'd want to.
Here's the distinction on policy. I am incredibly militant on Tabor. It needs to go. It needs to go yesterday. And if you're looking for a candidate who has worked on doing that, I'm right here. I have been and had the opportunity to be on the federal Tabor lawsuit team where we challenged that law in federal court. That law never saw a determination on its merits. I would love to see the legislature take that up again and challenge Tabor in state court. We have fantastic arguments, and all they need to do is be heard. Short of that, there's so many things we can do to tackle Tabor, from changing the Tabor calculation to adjust to straight ballot measures to all different kinds of things of creativity. But this is one of those policy areas where my lifetime in government and understanding in bureaucracy, where there's politics in the Department of Defense, there's politics in other agencies of federal government, you must build relationships and you must have tough conversations or change will never happen. I bring over 18 years of that experience to this job, and I would do that on day one.
Representative Epps?
I know that it was Tabor-based, but can you remind me what the specific...
Sure. The question was, what is your view on Tabor? If elected, what would you do to overturn it?
So, I'm not militant about it, but I certainly have very vocally and consistently for the entire time I've been here been opposed to Tabor. Those of us who, I wasn't born in Colorado, but I came here as soon as it was my choice, as soon as I had an option of where I could be. Tabor was something that just blew my mind. It was a concept that was like, wait a minute, we have to do what? And I've been opposed to it. Where there's this gap in terms of what we would do is so much of it depends on who the other 99 people there are, right? Right now, there's not 2/3 of us at the legislature who support repealing it. And so it's a bit of a standstill. I've not heard much traction about that proposal, but even Tabor, that's another example of something that didn't pass the first time it was attempted. Unfortunately, the proponents had quite a bit of sticking power and staying power there. Yeah, I've been on the record as opposing it. I've supported every proposal we can to realign and to to stabilize how we refund folks their rebates. I'm a bit disillusioned about this, I'll admit, because this is an issue that I thought Democrats were more aligned on, and I didn't know until I got to the legislature that the majority, maybe a majority, but that a supermajority of us do not want to overturn it. That's just where we are right now.
Thank you. This question is for Representative Epps, but I'll give you both an opportunity to respond. What is your plan for abolition? Obviously, we need some system in place to prevent crime, and police officers are, trying to decipher the writing there, wistfully, undereducated, and is it woefully? I think I see an I in there. I'm sorry, trying to decipher the handwriting. Well, I'm having a hard time deciphering the writing, but if you could just talk about abolition essentially and public safety.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. This was something that was much more of a conversation 2 years ago than it is now. Is there anybody here who is an abolitionist? A word that means, okay, great. So they will give you, that's really exciting, especially because there's people who raise their hands and I don't know. So that feels really good. Not everybody. Many people say when they run for office that they never intended to run for office, never saw it in the cards for them. I really never intended to run for office, and one of the ways that you can verify that is I would not have talked so much about abolition before running. I would have done the same work, but I wouldn't have used that word if I'd have thought I was going to be running. Abolition is about creation. We take the word from the history of those who were abolishing chattel slavery, the Quakers, the good Quakers in the South, who said, we are not going to reform slavery. We're not going to have a kinder, gentler slavery. We're not going to have a system where you're just nicer to the humans you own. We're going to abolish it. And so the queer feminists and the Black scholars who brought about modern abolition, just so you know in terms of nomenclature, we're paying homage to the fact that we're speaking existence into what we want, which is a world free of harm. As a practical matter, if I were to ask each of you, if we could, open up the prisons and let everyone out next weekend, I would imagine everyone would say no. I wouldn't support that. But wouldn't you support if we had a way for there to be none of the harm that leads people to be there? If we could have a world where we didn't have that violence, where we didn't have interpersonal harm. I'll tell you briefly that I came to abolition, there's more about this on my website, but I came to abolition as a survivor of rape, multiple sexual assaults, and a serious harm from childhood on. And it turns out that when you take a man who has hurt me terribly and you put him in the most violent place on earth outside of a war zone, turns out he doesn't come out safer, okay? Not just for me, but for everyone else. And so it's through that lens that we do the work that I can wrap up in 10 seconds, which is just to say that abolition is about giving people the things they need to be safe, to be well, to be whole, to be housed. And that interrupts the need for the policing of bodies and use of cages.
Mr. Camacho.
I have the unique position because I think I'm maybe one of the few, if only, members, if I'm elected, to be currently serving in the military. I actually have reserve duty this weekend. And what I've learned in those 18 years is that serving in the military 18 years ago was vastly different than it is today. Today we have training. Today is more inclusive. Today is more respectful. It's more effective. It's more cost effective. And it reflects more of the society we live in today. And what I take from that experience is that professional organizations must change. If you are looking for a candidate that would like to abolish the police or abolish jails, I am not your candidate. I think, from my experience, you can help policing change for the better for the 21st century. Look more reflective of our communities, make sure we are providing safety while being respectful, having police respond to the things that matter most, not mental health crises, not things that are nonviolent. I think there is space there for state leadership on helping our police force across the state change and modernize in a way that is respectful to all of us. Talk about policy differences, this is one right here.
Thank you. Mr. Camacho, who are the trusted advisors and subject matter experts and community leaders you will rely on to inform you of your decisions?
I see about 20 of them in this room right now. For everything our party is, one thing it is it incredibly supportive. From people who have had so much experience in the party, to people who are young and engaged, to people who are just trying to make it work. There are so many people in this room that have influenced me and helped me become not only a better candidate, but a better Democrat, a better activist, a better organizer. I look at my inspiration in this room, from elected officials who've been so kind with their time to provide mentorship, to party leaders and neighborhood organizers. This is my group. This is where I pull my strength. So thank you.
Thank you, Representative Epps.
That's an interesting question. The answer to who are the trusted advisors and subject matter experts, policy experts that we would turn to make decisions, it's very issue specific. I happen to be the expert, one of two west of the Mississippi, in one very narrow issue. You don't know anybody in Colorado that knows more about pretrial bail than myself and one other person. Most of our legislation isn't about pretrial bail. So with every other, and even on that one, I still consult with folks. But every other issue, I do very actively go to the folks who are directly impacted. I've find myself, when it comes to experts, being most interested in hearing from folks who have the least access to us. By us, I mean legislators at the Capitol, folks who don't have, who haven't bought access with donations and other ways that they support and have a standing invitation to be heard at the Capitol. Subject matter experts, it's most important to me that they be folks who are directly impacted. And I'll also say that, as a practical matter, I know that I serve this role when it comes to criminal legal issues for some of my colleagues. If you watch the House floor live, you'll often note that there's some folks who kind of vote last, and on certain issues it shifts who kind of votes last. I will admit, being part of the crew that, I've read the bill, I've done my assessment on certain environmental issues, I think I know how I'm going to vote, but I'll wait. I want to make sure Tammy's story is aligned, right? There's many of us, have, so in a practical way, there are folks who are those experts. But I'm most interested in directly impacted people and the ones who have been shut out from being able to be heard at the Capitol. And that's the opposite of the corporate donors who, frankly, buy elections, buy access, and buy vetoes.
Thank you. For this question, I'll start with Representative Epps. What are your first 5 bills for the 2025 session?
2025. You saying that out loud just hit in a weird way. So the political answer should be to tell you the 5 things that I would like them to be. Me, who is neurodivergent and who has now been through 2 sessions, understands that depends a lot on what the party allows. One of the most important bills that was passed this year, I'm not listed as the prime sponsor. It was my bill, it was my baby, but it's a bill that related overwhelmingly to a thing happening in the Aurora courts and to domestic violence victims, and so it made much more sense for me to get 2 of my colleagues who were more closely associated with those issues to run them. Long-winded way of saying the actual first 5 will be largely dependent on who's there, because there's some folks who I would rather advance some things I care about. Two of those will absolutely be bringing back our ban on assault weapons, because it's going to take at least 4 times for it to pass. Unfortunately, it will pass sooner if there's a tragic shooting, but we of course hope that doesn't happen. That often accelerates it. That'll be one. My colleagues want the opportunity to vote yes on that bill. A second will be, and this is directed by our drug policy experts, it'll be whatever they say is the most urgent issue for the past 2 years that has been passing an authorization on overdose prevention centers. We are still losing a person a day. That is another bill that my colleagues very much want to vote on, but are less comfortable being the prime sponsor on. So that list will be filled out by things that I'm needed for. Hope that makes some sense. Democrats want to vote yes on good policy and the things we put on our mailers, but it often has to be the representatives from Denver and Boulder who have the most bluest constituencies, frankly, who can be the lead sponsors on it. Those are the two that are certain, and every year that I serve, I will continue to put in place building blocks that'll get us to the point where we're ending wealth-based detention and ending cash bail by 2028 in Colorado.
Mr. Camacho.
I want to end Tabor. One of the first things I would do is work with colleagues to get the legislature to sue in state court. I mentioned that earlier. Tabor will be and continue to be the pressing issue of our time, and you need a Democrat who understands it. You need someone from a safe district to lead that charge, and I'm willing to do it, and I would love to do that. Short of that, I want to run a bill to adjust the Tabor calculation. Second, one of the beautiful things about campaigning is you get to talk to so many people, and you get to have experience and exposure to issues you didn't know existed. One thing throughout this time when I've been knocking doors and visiting people in their community and calling folks is a fear that corporations and hedge funds are buying up all of the possible single-family or homes to put people in a permanent renter class. I look at affordable housing as an equity issue. I am so incredibly fortunate to live in Lowry, and I would have never had that opportunity had I not purchased my first, or had the opportunity to use a government benefit to get into a home. That opportunity is fleeting for so many of us because these large corporations are purchasing properties that exist and removing that opportunity from everyone else. I would like to work on a bill for that. I would also like to continue to work on bills that focus on our environment. We're almost through summer, or we're at the beginning of summer, and it's only going to be a matter of time before we have our next wildfire. I think we need legislators that are willing to continue that hard work, because other than Tabor, environmental and climate change will continue to be a pressing issue of our time, and Colorado can continue to be a leader on that. We need laws that focus on emissions and protecting our land and protecting our water, because water, for all the 325,000 units that I mentioned, will continue to be an issue unless we get smart, unless we have policy positions and legislators who are willing to work in that space. So those are 3 big, broad issues. I've given you one specific one, and I hope I'm working on a lot more.
This next question is about sort of how you work with your constituents. So I'll start with Representative Epps. Do you think communicating with your, actually no, I'm going to start with Mr. Camacho, sorry. Do you think communicating with your constituents is a high priority, and how will you communicate with us? Do you think you should take a special interest in the people who live in HD6? Do you think we should be able to tell you our problems and get recommendations or assistance from you?
Yes, and yes. When you're running for office, you have to recognize you don't just represent yourself. You represent an entire district with different interests, with different concerns. And one of the beauties of our system is you better go talk to them if you want to hold this office. You better have relationships for people who or people who disagree with you and people who agree with you. Because when you're there and a bill comes up and you don't understand who to talk to or where your district is, you've already failed. This process is about building relationships with you, with the constituents, with neighbors, because that is how good policy is made. That is how you legislate, and that's what I would bring.
Representative Epps.
I forgot the order of them, but the gist of the answers is yes. When I mentioned that my not fully fleshed out proposal about the first term having an extra year. Part of that is that I think about a set of things that I would do differently in a future term, and how they're impeded by just the shape of the job. So for example, I don't believe in unpaid labor. I don't accept interns in my office. There's lots of complications around it, but because it's a worker justice issue. Volunteers are a different thing. And so a lot of the things that sort of comms work that I like, that I see some of my colleagues do, is done by unpaid labor. And there's been a real tension with figuring out how to, I just mean this as a practical way, right? How do you have folks, how do you hold this value of saying we support workers' rights and paying them for their labor, but we only, we're allowed to have kind of 1.5 staffers, but only one can have health insurance. I can't do that, right? So having one. So long way of saying, as I think about some of the communication, I know that I would raise money into the PAC and have to self-fund being able to have that support. It's a tenuous thing to say in a room of folks like us who are by definition extra engaged. I've been that person since I was 12, who was volunteering and working on Democratic campaigns. And as someone who's been a part of the party all that time, I'm super involved, but the vast majority of constituents aren't this level of involved. So a lot of the contact we have with folks who are constituents are in much more casual ways, whether they're coming to the Capitol or whether it's out and about in community or whether it's folks who are reaching out with, do you know what the number one issue that our office was contacted about this, probably everybody's office, but certainly mine. Does anybody know? Unemployment was the number one issue. And so, right, so a lot of the contact with constituents is help and support on that sort of way. Yes, of course, it's important to do all those things that you named. I do have success amnesia. It is a real thing, right? It's something to overcome. So when I accomplish something, it's done in my head. I don't think about celebrating it, and I would be way more intentional next year about making sure someone updates about wins, because my mind is always just thinking about what the next thing we need to do is, as opposed to celebrating what we've gotten done.
Thank you. And also, this one will start with Representative Epps. What will you do to assist seniors aging in place?
Thank you for that question. Seniors aging in place is one of the phrases that I feel like we're quickly changing, whether it's, aging Coloradans or elders, or we're consistently updating what we say. My father was a 30-year union member and is able to now be enjoying a comfortable retirement with dignity and support because of that union membership. It shouldn't be the case that you have to be a union member to have that. This past session, I was delighted to support one of the bills we got the most outreach about was about funding our senior-related area-based support, and of course the adjustments to making the portability requirement related to homestead. I don't know if it came up earlier when the senator was talking, but we talk a lot about homeowners who are seniors and how that helps folks be able to age in place. But we have a lot of seniors who are renters, and so this year was part of the work to extend additional protection, not for all renters, but we were able to do that for folks who are seniors. Cost of living and the other things that affect everyone fall disproportionately hard on folks who are at either end of life spectrum, children and our elders. And so when we do that work, we're investing in that way. This is also an example of something where I feel like it's important to let folks direct. I remember at Windsor Gardens 2 years ago, and this may have, who knows how that question will be answered now, but the number one issue that folks in a community where everyone was over 55, the number one issue that folks, or the issue that most folks listed, that more folks listed as their number one, can you guess what it was? Like in classroom, it was abortion. And I was so shocked by that until it was explained to me. People thought about it as, I worked on this, I thought we had it wrapped up, but I want to make sure it's handled. So that mattered, but the things around taxes and housing and supporting our area, I can't think of the word, the area centers on aging have been really important work that I've done and that I'll continue to do.
Mr. Camacho.
I think the last event we had like this was in April, and it was kind of a 15-minute open mic. And during that time, Like I am today, I'm talking a lot about my family. In April, when I talked to you in April, it was the 7th year anniversary of when my mother passed away very suddenly from a stroke. And what that has caused is my dad to be alone. So how do we adjust that? My brother lives down the street from my dad. I check in with him frequently. He is rapidly aging, and I think the issue that is most pressing for us is he has friends. He has friends that can live with him. But at some point, he's going to need more help. And I don't know if we can afford it. I think if you want to talk about respecting older adults, if you want to talk about taking care of the vulnerable in our community, then we need to talk about how are we making sure we have adequate at-home care and adequate nursing and are we putting policies in place to encourage young people to enter in these professions? Because this is going to be an issue for me, for everyone in this room at some point. And right now we are woefully behind. We need focus on this. And every day I look at my phone and just hope that my dad's okay and he didn't call. But one day that's going to happen. And I want to make sure that there's systems in place to take care of him.
So this will be the final question before closing comments. I think there's great power in vulnerability, so I think this is a good question. I'd like to ask each of you, what do you identify as your biggest weakness or area of growth? And a little addition to this question is don't choose a weakness as actually a strength. So this is a moment of vulnerability for both of us. Sure. What would you identify as your biggest weakness? And I'll add to that the area of personal growth. Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Camacho. Healthcare. I have been very transparent with everyone I talk about. I have been so fortunate to be in the military, where healthcare is free. I continue to serve in that space where I get healthcare, and while I have incredible sympathy, I don't fully understand that area. My wife is a doctor, and she helps educate me quite a bit in this space. But there was a person around today talking about universal healthcare for all. And I can tell you my lived experiences, it makes a huge difference in your life. And if we can get to the place where we can have more access to healthcare at cheaper costs, where you aren't one incident away from having housing insecurity, then we can make a difference. And I know what that looks like, but I don't know how to get there. I simply don't have that experience in my life. So I'm open to mentorship for all of you out there in the healthcare profession. Is this our closing comment, or is this just closing question? This is just last question, closing comments.
Okay. So, healthcare, please help.
Representative Epps.
Thank you for the question. I didn't interpret it to be about an area of policy weakness. I was trying to think of one. I interpreted it to be about a personal weakness. And that's how I'll answer it.
That's what I intended.
But I like the pivot. There was a rally, what is time? Last week or the week before at the Capitol. They actually gave out shirts that said Polis failed workers. I thought it was a really bold choice, but it was organized by labor groups objecting to the vetoes. And a colleague, a candidate, as we were walking up, said, Epps, I hate being called by my last name, but said, Epps, do you ever wish you just didn't care? And he was talking about sort of the righteous indignation I get about injustice. He wasn't actually talking about labor, I was just setting the scene, that's where we were. He was talking about open meetings and an issue that we've dealt with at the Capitol. And I looked at him, he's running in Arapahoe County, and I said, yes. And I don't mean this to turn it into it's also a strength. It is a strength that I tell the truth about. I keep looking at your shirt. Sinead O'Connor told the truth. And it took I hope she lived to see the world tell her that we knew she'd been telling the truth. It is a weakness that it is born out of being a child who, as I heard a defense attorney say once, some children make a choice to survive and they survive too loud. And I was one of those children where it was fight or flight. right? And my siblings made a different choice. And I'm still the adult who can't look the other way. And I wish I could, right? I do choose battles. I do rank things. But I'm also never going to be able, for example, to be okay with us continuing to break the open meetings law when we are the body that writes the law and we could just pass a rule we could follow. But it is a weakness in terms of it makes it that I have to, it makes it incredibly hard for me to see past someone who has failed me in terms of an injustice. And this period of being in office has been disillusioning in a way, to see that we have so much and could be doing so much more. And so it is a weakness to not be able to look the other way when an aide is being harassed, or where a colleague is drunk on the floor, or where we're breaking the open meeting law. And I just want to name, colleagues are fighting different battles. I don't see it as a moral hierarchy if someone isn't as outraged as I am about an issue. People are fighting different battles, but I wish I could let some of those go as well.
Thank you, Representative. When we did opening comments, we did start with Representative Epps. For closing comments, I'll go ahead and start with Mr. Camacho, 3 minutes.
We're here. We're not only at the end of this debate, we're at the beginning of the end of this primary election cycle. And I think everyone in this room has a choice about what type of representative you want. And one thing that I learned early on in my legal career was when you fight for things that you really care about, you must do it in a way that allows others to follow you. And that is what I offer. I offer a way to make sure that we are living and showcasing our democratic values. And I am so thrilled and excited to have the endorsement of almost half of every Democrat in the legislature. And I'm even more proud to have the endorsement of some of the people who have held this seat before, from Senator Lois Court to Senator Hansen to Representative Woodrow. These are people that have done the work, that think that a change is needed, and think that we can do so much more together. And ballots should be in your mailbox, if they're not already, within the next few days. And I started off by saying I truly believe we can do some special things together. And I hope to earn your vote. I hope to be a partner with you going forward in this work. So thank you.
Representative Epps, please.
Thank you. I told you all a month or so ago, and I still think it's true. And it's the thought that has overwhelmingly made me decide to ask for this job again, something I was very conflicted about, to be blunt. And it's the thought that you cannot fight the far right by hovering in the middle. And as important as this primary election is the election that's coming up in November. Maybe it's not the folks in this room, but I promise you that a massive number of Democrats and of folks who vote Democratic are incredibly disillusioned with our party. Workers, renters, union members, young folks, people of color overwhelmingly feel abandoned, feel baited and switched, feel like there's not a place for us in this party. I don't think that they're right, but they might be. And this fall is going to be a chance. There's going to be another chance for that to be a distinction. So this primary, much like the one 2 years ago, is an opportunity for us to reject the notion that voting blue is enough. Voting blue, no matter who, is not enough. From the State House to the White House, it has to be the case that folks who proclaim progressive values, and in this race I'm that candidate, can actually back it up and not just talk that talk, but walk the walk. I'm so proud of what my colleagues and I have done in many spaces. And I see how close we are, God bless the Senate, but to advancing the progressive values and policy that we put on our mailers, but we're a few votes short. And we can't get the progress we need if we're doing anything other than picking the true progressive candidate. Shirley Chisholm, when she was running for president, said that a catalyst for change has to be willing to withstand the slurs, the abuses, the insults, and the lies. Because by definition, a catalyst for change is going to be upsetting to the status quo who is benefiting from the system as it is. I'm not benefiting from much of the system as it is. I've been doing the work to fight on behalf of Colorado. I've been telling the truth in doing so. It's what I'm going to continue to do. It's been a real honor to be in this work. And while I'm one of the many Democrats who feels disillusioned, I'm also one of the Democrats who's not giving up and who's committed to saving the democracy, as Black women are asked to do every 4 years. And I'll mention that in saving the democracy and in saving this country from the far right rise of fascism, the Democratic Party might just get saved in the process. Appreciate you.
Thank you. Let's give it up for both of our candidates, please. Another round.
And a round of applause for our moderator.